Hey guys, and welcome back to another week of NFL, and of course, another week of fantasy football. And for us, that means another excellent, great, exciting week of daily fantasy football. This is the NFL Week 6 DFS Slate Playbook video here at No Huddle Fantasy Sports, where we're going to break down this upcoming Sunday's main slate. Whether you play on DraftKings or FanDuel, I've got you covered with core plays at every single position, Vegas totals, games we should be attacking, games we might want to avoid, stacks, essentially all of the information and data points you need to make decisions for this upcoming Sunday's main slate. So if you're here for some DFS content, if you want to know which players you should be putting into your lineups and building your lineups around for this upcoming Sunday's main slate, you've come to the right spot. Sit back, relax, and let's talk some NFL Week 6 DFS. Yo, hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to the channel. Welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports. As always, I thank you guys for finding this channel and taking the time to click on this video and basically joining me here as we talk some Week 6 NFL DFS. If you're new here, simply haven't done so already, the only ask I have for you guys is to make sure you're subscribed to the channel, make sure you give these videos a like, and go ahead and leave some comments down below of players you're liking, core players you're liking for this upcoming Sunday's main slate, maybe some things that maybe I have missed. If there's any mistakes I've made, I'd love to hear from you guys. This isn't meant to just be a one-way street. You know, I'm giving you the information and the points of view that I have for this Sunday's main slate, but I'd love to hear from you guys too. And we do have a weird, but I think exciting Week 6 ahead of us. And by weird, I mean we only have 10 games. We typically have about 13 total games on a given slate, give or take a game. So if you figure this upcoming week, we only have 10, you're talking 6 total teams removed from this slate. And that's mainly due to two things. A, we have the London game. That's now built into, I don't know how long this season they're going to be doing it, but there's several games taken off of main slates due to the London game. In addition to that, we have a number of bye weeks for teams starting this week. So a combination of that now leads us to 10 total games for this particular Sunday's main slate. And as a result of that, of course, we have a smaller pool of players generally to pick from. And if you take that one step further, that means we have a smaller pool of players that we're actually interested in building lineups around. So take that into consideration. You definitely are going to see some concentrated ownership among certain players, certain obvious plays that you didn't see in previous weeks. I'm sure some of the ownership numbers will jump up a little bit because, again, you're talking 6 total teams removed from the slate, a lot of players pulled out of that, and it's really just going to start to get concentrated amongst the players that are definitely obvious plays. There still are a number of injuries you want to make sure you're following, making sure you're keeping up to date with. This video is being recorded on Saturday morning, so by Sunday, things will change. You're going to get some clarity on certain questionable injuries, game time decisions, all of that. Don't just set your lineups and forget about it. Make sure you're checking everything before kickoff on Sunday and making sure you have the best plays in as a result of whatever comes out of the injury news. I talked about how there's only 10 games on this slate, and that's kind of resulting in a certain limitation on high-scoring games, high-scoring teams. We have very few, compared to previous weeks, very few over-unders that are really high on this week, and we also have very few teams with high implied team individual totals. So all of that will matter. We like to look at those numbers, especially in this, week 5, week 6 forward. Vegas is getting a little more accurate. But you can't just jump on the games that have high totals this week because simply there aren't many of them available. So we're going to have to dig in. We're going to have to find the best plays regardless of the Vegas totals. There are, as a result of some of those injuries I mentioned, several value plays already at the running back position. I think this is, of all weeks, this is the best week in terms of value at running back. Although those guys will be chalky, they're already going to be juiced up a little bit because of the shortened number of teams on this slate, but also because there's very few other values on this slate. So you're going to see running back position open up in terms of value, and then you're going to see some ownership go there. As a result of that, if we're going to pick some of those running backs, we can pay up elsewhere. And in my opinion, this is a great week to pay up at quarterback, especially on FanDuel, where I think it does matter a lot more. But in general, I think this is a great week to pay up at quarterback, and that's some of the strategy I'm going to be building into some of my picks here. So I did talk about Vegas very briefly there, but to look at the numbers here, and again, you're talking 10 total games on this slate, so fewer than normal. You can see here, the Rams, Giants, 54.5, the Chargers, Ravens at 51, and the Cowboys, Patriots at 50.5 are the only 3 games. There's only 3 with implied or with over-unders above 50. We usually have more than that. But what's a little more interesting than that, even if you look into those particular games, there's only one team of those games with an implied team total above 28, and that's the Rams. You also have the Chiefs sitting at 31 for an implied team total, but in general, that is odd. We have, again, compared to previous weeks, very, very few games with high over-unders. Those games that do exist don't have a lot of points being projected from the teams in those games, at least high totals. And then only, as I mentioned, 2 teams with above a 28 implied team total. On the flip side, we have about 4 total teams that are questionable in terms of targeting them from a multiple player standpoint. That's the Giants and Houston, both of those teams under 20 for an implied team total. And then you have Detroit, Chicago, and Las Vegas all under 22. I'm not saying you can't pick players from those teams, but it's something to make sure you're aware of. There's not a lot of points being projected from Vegas for those teams, meaning if you do pick players, there's only so many touchdowns to go around when there's 2 touchdowns being scored by Houston, for example, or 1 touchdown and 4 field goals, whatever it might be. So make sure you take that into consideration. Again, I'm not telling you or discouraging you from playing an excellent play in one of those games, but it's definitely something you want to consider as you select core players or players in this particular slate. So moving on here, let's start with our core positional players. As always, we start with the quarterback position. And basically, we're sticking with the 2020 quarterback draft class here. And that's Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow. Both of these guys at this point in their career, early point of their career, are playing excellent football. And we're hoping to take advantage of that this week. And that's pretty much the bottom line. Justin Herbert is expensive. He's $7,300 on DraftKings. $8K on FanDuel, playing on the road in Baltimore with a 51 over-under. The Chargers are underdogs at plus 2.5 with a 24.5 implied team total. I mentioned all of that with everyone I do, but for Herbert, it's particularly interesting in my opinion. The stars are kind of aligning here from a Vegas perspective. You have a great quarterback, excellent, basically elite quarterback right now, playing on the road in Baltimore. A very healthy 51 over-under, so points are expected to be scored. They are close underdogs, meaning under a field goal, so the game should remain tight and close, and a 24.5 implied team total, so a lot of touchdowns to be scored by that particular team, at least from a Vegas perspective. All of those come together in terms of Justin Herbert here, and I think it makes for him to be an excellent play this week 6. So starting at that point, I think just from a Vegas perspective, Justin Herbert is turning out to be my favorite number 1 core play at the quarterback position. In terms of projections from Daily Fantasy Nerd, 23.6 for DraftKings, 22 on FanDuel. And very quickly, if you haven't done so already, make sure you check out Daily Fantasy Nerd. It's the optimizer I've used. I would say I've used it for at least 5 years now. I've tried just about every optimizer out there, and I seemingly always come back to DFN, Daily Fantasy Nerd. I've linked them down in the description in the whatever of this particular video. You can click it. It does help this channel. It is a little bit of a boost for the channel. If you do click that link, they do offer a free trial. So if you haven't tried it out, I encourage you to try it out. I use it for all of these videos. I put all my lineups together through Daily Fantasy Nerd, and really I wouldn't be doing as well as I am without it. So I do encourage you to check out optimizers in general, but Daily Fantasy Nerd is one of the ones that kind of go under the radar, and I think is an excellent option if you don't have one already. But back to Justin Herbert here. He's coming off an absurd Week 5 performance. If you didn't check that game, it was Cleveland, Chargers. Game basically in the fourth quarter was just back and forth. I think they scored like 1,000 points in the fourth quarter alone between both teams. But nonetheless, Herbert was able to answer Cleveland each and every single time until basically time ran out and Herbert was the last one to score. So I do love Justin Herbert this week, coming off really a hot performance in Week 5. Herbert is averaging 41 passing attempts per game. I mentioned that because volume is king, right? Whether it's quarterback, wide receivers, running backs, whatever. You want opportunities, and for the quarterback position, that's passing attempts, that's volume, and he does certainly get it. Even in games they're winning, he's still throwing the ball a ton. 41 pass attempts per game is an excellent indicator, an excellent volume number that we want to stick with for DFS. One very important thing for this particular game, it is the fastest, it's listed as the fastest paced game on this main slate. Baltimore runs fast on offense, and the Chargers run fast on offense. Chargers are also on the road here, and it's a high-scoring game. Why does this matter? Fast pace means more opportunity. That's more rushing attempts, more throwing attempts. All of that comes into play. As you play faster, you generate more opportunity, and that's what we want to take advantage of here from a DFS perspective, and certainly want players and quarterbacks from the fastest pace games on the slate, and that's what we have here between them and Baltimore. He shouldn't face much pressure. You can see here Baltimore's pass rush is graded in the bottom half of the league. In addition to that, Herbert's offensive line is playing excellent, especially compared to last season. They've made some changes, they put some work into it, and he's certainly seeing the fruits of that bear right now. He's not getting pressured much. It's a good offensive line, one of the best in the NFL right now. In addition to that, Baltimore's defense of line doesn't line up well against them. So I think he should have plenty of time in the pocket to make big splash plays, deep plays to Mike Williams, players like that. I do want to focus on quarterbacks often that have a concentrated target share if we can, and we do have that here. I think Mike Williams and Keenan Allen make up over 50%, possibly even 60% of the target share for the Chargers. Now you have Eckler in there, who does get a good chunk, but in general for wide receivers, that's a huge number, and we want that, right? We want to not only pick our quarterback, but know who to stack him with and capitalize on opportunity. So we do have that with Herbert and his offense. Last couple things I'll mention here. Great matchup. In addition to all the indicators I just mentioned, Baltimore secondary is graded 22nd overall by Pro Football Focus. They're also ranked 20th in terms of DVOA from Football Outsiders. So they're not obviously living up to the expectations. They've had some injuries. They're playing at home, but I do really think they are still a bottom half of the league defense, even on their best day. It's an excellent matchup for Herbert, and everything's pointing for it to be a great game for him. And I'm going to be taking advantage of that as my number one quarterback. I also do love Joe Burrow here. He's 6,300 on DraftKings, 74 on FanDuel, so you're definitely saving some money dropping down to Joe Burrow. He's playing on the road in Detroit with a 47 over-under. Cincinnati is a favorite at -3.5. Nonetheless, still a close game, competitive game, and he's a good implied team total of 25.5. Projections for him stand at 20.7 for DraftKings, 19.5 for FanDuel, so good numbers there. And some of the things that are pointing up for Joe Burrow, basically he has scored multiple touchdowns in each game. His performances continue to build on one another, meaning he's playing better and better and better every single week. I'm sure he's getting more comfortable coming off that injury. Week 5 was by far his best performance of the year. Cincinnati's pass volume in general is increasing, slowly increasing every week, so he's getting more opportunities, more volume. His wide receiver core coming into week 6 here should be fully healthy. That's Chase, Boyd, and who am I missing? That's Chase, Boyd, and Higgins. All those guys should be in the lineup. He will have Joe Mixon back, I believe, too. And Joe Mixon, basically anyone versus Detroit is a great option. Joe Mixon being one of them. But I do like Joe Burrow. I do like the fact that he is, fully healthy from a weapons perspective. It's a great spot for him against this Detroit team. Talking about Detroit, now their pass rush is the best part of their defense. It's not great. It's ranked 12th overall. It's not a bottom half of the league team. It's kind of right there league average. But in general, everything else is really bad. Their secondary is graded 32nd overall by Pro Football Focus, and they're 27th in terms of DVOA from a pass defensive perspective. So really good spot, really bad defense. I like Joe Burrow as my number 2 quarterback in terms of core plays, a guy that I'll be building some stacks around most certainly. Moving on to the running back position here, 2 guys I do want to mention to build in terms of core plays, and that's Jonathan Taylor and Kareem Hunt. Both guys, from an efficiency standpoint, are very similar, right? They're guys that have done a lot with less. But I think this is a great week to take advantage of that. Jonathan Taylor, 6,600 on DraftKings, 75 on FanDuel, playing at home versus Houston with a 43.5 over-under. Indianapolis is a massive home favorite at -10 with a good implied team total of 26.5. So those numbers are great, right? You have a running back. You basically check every box except for one, which I'll mention, and that's his usage and snap count. But in general, you have a huge home favorite, a lot of points to be scored, bad defense, and a good running back versus them. That's what we want, right, from DFS, and that's what we're getting here with Jonathan Taylor. Now, I mentioned his usage. It has been a little concerning, but it is trending up week in and week out. He played 52% of the snaps in week 5. Now, if you take that into consideration and go backwards, week 2 he had 45%, 48 in week 3, 51, and you can see 52 in week 4. So every week it's creeping up a little bit more. Hopefully we see that even tick up a little bit more here in week 5, but all good indicators, meaning he's trending upwards in terms of usage. But the more important thing here is he has been extremely efficient with the limited snap counts. He's averaging half a fantasy point per snap, which is 4th overall in the NFL for running backs. There's only a couple running backs ahead of him. So even on less snaps, he's still finding ways to be efficient. The good thing, though, regardless of his snap counts, he is the guy in the goal line in red zone situations. He leads actually all of NFL, all running backs, in terms of red zone carries with 25, and he also leads the NFL with 8 carries within the 5-yard line. So even in limited snaps, he's really efficient with those snaps, and he's getting the high value snaps, which is close to the goal line. That's what we want out of a running back. And I don't think it'll matter here. Even if he only gets 50% of the snaps, I think the Houston defense is just a defense you want to target with running backs. And again, hopefully he gets up to 60% or so, but even at 50%, I'm comfortable playing Jonathan Taylor versus this defense. There's a huge O-line, D-line rush advantage here, talking about that defense at plus 36%. Houston's rush defense is graded 27th overall by Pro Football Focus, so one of the worst teams in the NFL. And then that lines up with rush DVOA from Football Outsiders. Houston's defense is ranked 30th overall. So great spot for any running back versus this Houston team. Certainly a guy like Jonathan Taylor, who is just lining up even at limited snaps, but lining up is definitely the dog, the back to take against them. Another guy I'm absolutely in love with this week is Kareem Hunt. Now, he might be chalky, which is a little bit unfortunate because I was really geared up to play him. But Kareem Hunt is 6,200 on DraftKings, 74 on FanDuel, playing at home versus Arizona. 49.5 over-under, and Cleveland is a slight home favorite at -3 with a 26.3 implied team total. Good projections for him. 19.7 on DraftKings, 17.1 on FanDuel. The big thing here is Nick Chubb is out. That's basically the bottom line. Playing behind one of the best offensive lines, rushing blocking offensive lines in the NFL. Now Kareem Hunt is going to be that guy, the lead dog, basically, I would imagine the only guy that's going to get snaps in this particular game, and I want to take advantage of that, and I do recommend you guys also, regardless of the opponent. But this is a good spot. This is a good opponent to attack with a running back, and again, I think it's a great spot for Kareem Hunt. Any running back with Nick Chubb out, it's just lining up to be an excellent pick here at the running back position. But all things considered, even with Chubb in, Kareem Hunt has been very good, right? He has had double-digit carries in 4 out of 5 games. He's exceeded 15 fantasy points in 4 out of 5 games. He's essentially been I would say the second most efficient running back, uber efficient running back in the NFL at 0.58 fantasy points per snap. That's second overall in the NFL. The only guy that's exceeding that, you can probably guess, is Cordell Patterson, who's playing about 10 snaps a game and scoring 3 touchdowns, which is unsustainable. But Kareem Hunt has done this for a few years now for Cleveland. Even on limited snaps, it's a two-headed monster, him and Chubb. He's been really good and really efficient with limited snaps, and now those snaps are going to increase, obviously, with Chubb out. So I think it's just lining up to be an excellent play, an excellent spot for him to go off. He's averaging 1.27 fantasy points per touch. That's third overall in the NFL. Again, just showing more of that efficiency. When he touches the ball, he's putting out points. His O-line, D-line is at the advantage in terms of rush is at plus 96%. Now, there should be some offensive linemen banged up for Cleveland, possibly even missing this game. But nonetheless, it's still a great spot because Arizona's rush defense is graded 31st overall by Pro Football Focus. You know, there's only 32 teams in the NFL, ladies and gentlemen. They're one of the worst against the rush. Now, that doesn't necessarily align with DVOA, though. So they're ranked 13th overall in terms of DVOA. That's middle of the pack. It's not great, but I would imagine Arizona's rush defense sits somewhere in between, bottom half of the league. Not great, but not the worst. And they're on the road here. So I do like Kareem Hunt. I would say he's probably my favorite back on this slate as we move forward. But both of these guys, Jonathan Taylor and Kareem Hunt, are my 2 core plays I'm going to be building a lot of lineups around in terms of running backs. Moving on to the wide receiver position here, I want to mention 2 guys, and that's DJ Moore and Jacoby Myers. Kind of for different reasons here, but let's start with DJ Moore. 7,300 on DraftKings, 76 on FanDuel, playing at home versus Minnesota with a 46 over-under. Carolina it's basically a pick'em. They're an underdog at home at +1, but a 22.5 implied team total, and he's projected 18.7 on DraftKings and 14.7 on FanDuel. Good numbers for him all around. Having an excellent season, has good chemistry with Darnold. They're just doing big things with DJ Moore this year, which is good to see because he is one of the better, in my opinion, elite wide receivers in the league. And we're going to try to take advantage of that this week versus Minnesota. So he's averaging 10 targets a game, which is a great thing, right? You want double-digit targets, opportunities to score points, and he has 6 red zone targets on the year, so getting about 1 a game right now, a little over that. I'd like to see that number go up. There's obviously a lot of wide receivers that get many more red zone targets than DJ Moore, so hopefully that number does increase, particularly with McCaffrey out. Nonetheless, he's getting some red zone targets. It's a great weekly matchup in terms of strength of schedule for the wide receiver position. Now, it's not the best, but in terms of who's available on this slate, the 10 games, DJ Moore's lines up as one of the better ones to attack from a wide receiver perspective. It's a great wide receiver cornerback matchup. I get that from Pro Football Focus at 85.8. There's only a few guys above him, so who he is projected to line up against, he should be able to take advantage of. Other numbers that support DJ Moore here, he gets an elite 28% of the team's targets. Almost basically a third of the targets go to DJ Moore when they have to throw the ball. 10.06 average depth of target. That's an elite number, by the way. Anything above 10 is definitely great. It means he's getting important down the field targets, not just dinks and dunks, not just stuff behind the line of scrimmage. The guy's actually going downfield and getting targets from Darnold. In addition to that, he has 36% of the team's air yards. So over a third of the team's air yards down the field do go to DJ Moore. Again, he's getting a lot of targets, and those targets are valuable down the field. Minnesota secondary is pretty good. They're ranked top 10 in the NFL. Not one of the top 5, not an elite number, but they are top 10 overall from Pro Football Focus. But I think that is a little bit skewed. If you go back and look at some of the box scores, and I know box score chasing isn't the way to go, but just to try to figure out who has taken advantage of them, right? Metcalf, Jamar Chase, Moore and Hopkins from Arizona, you had T. Higgins. All of these guys have had either big games or scored touchdowns versus Minnesota. I do mention Odell with a question mark because he was open about 17 times, but Baker Mayfield looked like he was throwing an ultimate frisbee to him. It just literally could not hit him. So he could have had 3 touchdowns in that game, and maybe some of those numbers for Minnesota secondary would be adjusted. But nonetheless, I still think it's a great spot for DJ Moore. He's one of my core wide receivers to build around. I'm trying to find some value here at wide receiver, and I think one of those guys is Jakobi Meyers. He's $5,500 on DraftKings, $58 on FanDuel, so a good price on both sites. Not the cheapest, but certainly not an expensive guy, and a guy that I think you can take advantage of this weekend. He's playing at home versus Dallas, a good total. I talked about it earlier at 50.5 for an over-under. New England is a underdog at home at +3.5 with a 24 implied team total. The projections aren't great. They're not bad, but they're not, 18, 19, 20. You're seeing 13.9 for DraftKings and just over 10 on FanDuel. But the important thing here is the price, right? He's going to offer some value at his salary. His salary has dropped from week 5, didn't have a great performance in week 5, but in general, games that they've won, he hasn't been great. If you think this game is one in which they're going to trail, which I do, versus Dallas. Dallas is playing some excellent football this year, which is unusual. They usually find a way to screw it up. But when they have trailed, it's New England Patriots, Jakobi Meyers does put up great numbers. Just go back, look at games they've lost or games they've trailed for most of it, and you can see the numbers definitely bump up for him. So his salary's coming down, and it's a game in which I think they're going to have to throw a lot. I really like this play with Jakobi Meyers. He is top 10 in the NFL, quietly, with 46 targets. He's averaging over 9 a game. It's a good matchup for him at 65.9, and that's the wide receiver cornerback matchup. He's getting basically a quarter of the team's targets. He has a 9.0 ADOT with 32% of the team's air yards. So all valuable things to make sure you're looking at here for wide receivers. And as I mentioned, when they trail, he's getting number bumps, and I do think they will trail here. Now, Dallas' secondary has graded out really well. They're top 5 in the NFL. They're playing very well on defense, but I don't think it necessarily always matters. You don't want to just avoid that, right? You look at the price here, and he's 55. He's under 6K on both sites. So if you're going to get 10, 12 targets out of him, and he's going to catch 6, 7, 8 balls, hopefully find the end zone, he's definitely going to pay off, and I do like Jakobi Meyers from that perspective. The tight end position is always a tricky one. It's always hard to find value. It's always, you're either picking guys at the very bottom of the barrel or you're paying a ridiculous amount of money for a tight end. But I will list 2 guys here, and that's Travis Kelce and Ricky Seals-Jones, both guys playing in the same game. And so it's similar reasoning behind the high totals and the points to be scored for both of these teams that they play for. But let's start with Travis Kelce. He's 7K on DraftKings, 85 on FanDuel. It's important to note, he has dropped $1,000 on DraftKings. So I'm trying to find guys that have dropped in salary. Maybe they shouldn't have dropped as much, and I think Travis Kelce is one of those guys. You want to catch them when their salary is going down and be taking advantage of that before they jump back up after a big performance, and that could be this week. Obviously, Travis Kelce, any given week, is an excellent play, and I do believe that, really. But this week is one in particular that I think it's worth paying the $7,000 for him. He's playing on the road in Washington with a 54.5 over-under. Kansas City is an underdog, or a favorite, on the road here at -6.5 with a 31 implied team total. I mentioned already, his price has declined significantly, especially on DraftKings, but you're talking about a guy, one of the best wide receivers, or best tight ends in the game that basically is a wide receiver, the number 2 option for the Kansas City Chiefs, and the highest game total with the highest implied team total. Good things here, right? They throw the ball a lot. Tyreek Hill is injured. He's questionable. They're obviously missing CEH now, so we'll see how their running game fares, and it has not fared well so far this season. They're throwing the ball a lot. I do love Travis Kelce this week for all of those reasons, plus the fact that he is just Travis Kelce. He is projected basically tiers above every other tight end on this slate. Meaning if you go to Daily Fantasy Nerd and you just look at the projections for him in terms of points, it is 4, 5, 6 points above the second guy on this slate. So he is really, really far and wide the most projected, highest projected player tight end on this slate. He is averaging 8 targets a game. You'd like to see that go up a little bit more, but obviously for a tight end, that's ridiculous. That's elite. He has a 21% target per route run, meaning that's 4th overall for tight ends in the NFL, meaning every time he runs a route, you have like a 25% chance, 21% chance that the ball is going to come his way. You love to see that. He's averaging basically half a point fantasy point per route run. That's also 4th in the NFL among tight ends. Again, when he runs a route, he's basically generating points. That's what we want from our tight ends. And he leads the slate here with a 61% tight end matchup, according to Pro Football Focus. So should be an excellent spot for him nonetheless, but it is Travis Kelce. Every week he's in play. I do particularly like him in week 6. On the other side of the ball, though, I do like Ricky Seals-Jones. He is really cheap. He's $3K on DraftKings, $5K on FanDuel, playing at home. Basically everything I just said in the reverse. Versus Kansas City, good over-under. They are underdogs at +6.5 at home with a 24.5 implied team total. Basically near min salary on DraftKings. He's a value on both sites. It's a value only play. It's a way to save money. A complete dud is definitely possible with Ricky Seals-Jones, although I think it's unlikely this week because they're going to have to throw a lot and they're going to have to try to keep up with the Chiefs. Now, the Chiefs have not been playing well, so we'll see how this plays out. A lot of people love Heineke this week. I didn't give him as one of my core plays because if everyone's going to play Heineke, I'm going to pivot another way, and that's what we're going to do this week in particular. But that means people like Heineke for a reason. They're probably going to put up a lot of points. They're probably going to pass well against this really weak secondary, really weak defense of Kansas City. And I think Ricky Seals-Jones has a definite chance of paying off his salary. I mean, if he just catches a couple balls, you're fine. If he scores a touchdown, it's icing on the cake. It's a positive tight end matchup, though, in this particular matchup at +33%. You're talking about the highest total Vegas game. I mentioned that with Kelce. Obviously, that applies here. Projected to have a heavy pass volume from Washington, so hopefully we continue to see his targets, which he had 8 targets in week 5. They've trended up every single week. Hopefully, I'll take 8 targets. I mean, that's fine at his price tag. Hopefully, we see that again this week. He is the highest overall, though, which is crazy. On this particular slate, the highest overall fantasy points per route run and yards per route covered. So those are stats that are a little bit, obscure, but they do matter. When you're trying to drill down and find some value, find some tight ends that will make an impact, I think both of those stand out here for Ricky Seals-Jones. Kansas City has also allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to the tight end position. Again, it's a good matchup, and that's basically the bottom line here. I do like Ricky Seals-Jones. I understand if you can't go there because of how he has put up duds, and it could happen again, but he's certainly a guy that I think stands out as potentially paying off dividends in terms of value. Now, as always, I like to talk about some of the stacks, the 2 quarterbacks I did mention for core plays. That's Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow. For Justin Herbert, 2 guys are very obvious for him. And that's Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Interchangeably, you could go either way. Mike Williams is very expensive now. He has been unreal this season. I think he's the number 2 overall wide receiver in fantasy points scored just having a resurgence of a year. Not late in his career, but definitely didn't do this early in his career. And he's in year 4 or 5 now. But him and Keenan Allen, again, double stack them individually. Both guys in play with Justin Herbert. And then I think it's an excellent opportunity to come back with Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews. If you want to stack this entire game, go Justin Herbert, Allen, Williams, Brown, and Mark Andrews. All of that can be built together. Trust me, I've done it. And it's, if it's your favorite game, which in my case it is, a lot of points are going to be scored, a lot of touchdowns. It's going to be a fun game to watch. I do like that overall game stack. But nonetheless, Herbert with Allen and Williams, coming back with one of those guys is a great spot too in terms of stacking. For Joe Burrow, in order of guys I like with him, that's Chase, Higgins, and Boyd. I think you could probably switch, flip-flop Higgins and Boyd, but definitely Jamar Chase. He's having an unreal year, especially after the preseason, things that people said about him, right? They said he couldn't catch the ball, he had a lot of drops, didn't know what he was doing, blah, 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 blah. He made the comment about he couldn't see the laces or the white on the ball, whatever, right? The guy has obviously turned up for Cincinnati here, and Joe Burrow loves him. Obviously, they went to school together, they have a good chemistry, and it's clicking right out the gate here. So Jamar Chase is definitely the guy you want with Burrow, but I do like going with Higgins and Boyd also. So double stack those guys, figure out how to fit them in. It does work here. And then in terms of coming back, I do like DeAndre Swift. Now, Detroit is bad on offense, but the one thing about Cincinnati I will mention, they give up a lot of receptions to running backs, and DeAndre Swift has some crazy games in terms of targets and receptions at the running back position. So I do like coming back with Swift, and then in terms of there is no wide receiver really, but in terms of a wide receiver or tight end you can come back with, that's TJ Hawkinson at 5,064 on FanDuel. So those are the guys I will come back with. Again, Joe Burrow with Jamar Chase, throw in Higgins or Boyd, and then come back with Swift or Hawkinson. I'm not looking at a game stack here, but those are definitely some of the stacks I'm looking at for this upcoming week 6. So we covered a lot there. It is a shorter slate, as I mentioned. I don't have as many other highlights here because the guys I gave out are a lot of the guys I'm really, really building around, right? I'm not just making this stuff up. Those are the core plays. I love Herbert. I love Burrow. I love Hunt. All those guys are definitely guys I'm building around. But I will mention, if you're looking at other quarterbacks, Tyler Heineke is definitely in play this week as a value quarterback. The problem is everybody and their brother is talking about him. If you click on any other video, they're probably giving out Heineke as a play. I could do that. I could just copy everyone else. But in my opinion, I play GPPs. If everybody's going to go with Heineke, I'm going to pivot, right? He could still be really bad. He's not like a world-class quarterback. Maybe he is, but there is, in my opinion, just a likelihood of him having a really bad performance, even at his salary, than me going with the guys I recommended. So I am pivoting off that, trying to find other ways to take advantage of that Washington team, but maybe I'll have some of him. I'm not totally sure yet. He's not going to be one of my top 2 or 3 guys, but he is in play. If you're looking for a value quarterback, it's definitely Taylor Heineke. Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, both of those guys in play. Be careful with Kyler Murray, though. Arizona is having a lot of trouble with COVID right now. I believe Kingsbury has now been rolled out for the Cleveland game, so that'll be interesting. But Kyler Murray, definitely, obviously, MVP pace this year. Lamar Jackson, if you're just not going to play Herbert, you can come back the other way and just reverse it, right? Lamar Jackson definitely in play this week also for Baltimore. And again, my favorite game overall. I talked about DeAndre Swift, Joe Mixon in play. I talked about him a little bit. If I'm not playing Burrow, I'm probably getting some exposure to Joe Mixon. Darrell Henderson, Darrell Williams, both the Darrells there are in play. The Rams, Darrell Henderson in a great spot. Huge favorites, although they are on the road. And then I mentioned Darrell Williams and basically the next 3 guys, Williams, Herbert, and Hubbard, all value plays. Basically in that order. Hubbard not necessarily as much of a value as the other 2, but especially Herbert. Both of those guys are in play this week because of injuries and COVID and things like that. Those are your value running backs. I didn't really build them into the video, but if you want the value running backs, again, I'll circle back here. We got Darrell Williams for Kansas City, Khalil Herbert for Chicago, and Chuba Hubbard for Carolina. Those guys are finding their ways into my lineup because they do save you money. In terms of wide receivers, Cooper Kupp's in play every single week. He puts up crazy numbers, has a ridiculous target share, and if no one's talking about him, then you need to be playing Cooper Kupp because that's a great way to, safely, in my opinion, take advantage of low ownership. Cooper Kupp is definitely in play this week. Terry McLaurin is a way you can get exposure to that Washington side of the ball. He's an elite receiver. Heineke does have a good connection with him, does look his way often, so I do like Terry McLaurin for Washington as a wide receiver. And then Odell Beckham Jr. for Cleveland. If I'm not playing Hunt and I'm trying to come back against, maybe Kyler Murray, I'm going to be looking OBJ's way a little bit. He has been talking a lot this last week. I think he wants the ball, so usually when that occurs, it does seem like Baker tries to force feed him the ball. We'll see what happens this week, but try to take advantage of that if you can, if you like that. And Noah Fant is another tight end I'm interested in. He's not as cheap as some of the ones I gave out, not as cheap as Ricky Seals-Jones, for example, but Noah Fant is in a good spot this week. He's been a very steady, good tight end for Denver, and definitely a guy I would consider at the tight end position. And so that really wraps it up. I do mention in every video, again, down below in the comments is Daily Fantasy Nerd, the link, the optimizer, all that. I can't build a video, I can't build a lineup without that optimizer. So I do thank them. It's a great one. I wouldn't recommend it to you guys if I didn't believe in it myself. So feel free to check it out. There is a little bit of a kickback to this particular channel. If you do so to myself, I would appreciate that. But there is a free trial, so try it out for free, and don't pay for whatever reason. But it does help the channel a lot if you do subscribe to them. And that really wraps it up. I thank you guys, as always, for tuning in here. Hopefully we're off to a good week 6 start here. Hopefully you guys have some information to help you build some core lineups. I'm interested, as always, in your thoughts and your comments. If I've made any mistakes, if anything stands out, if anything has really transpired or developed over the last couple of days, let me know down in the comments. I do really appreciate that. The goal here is for us all to build great lineups and to cash on Sunday, and so that's what we intend to do. But as always, thank you guys for tuning in. I wish you the best of luck, and I'll check you out in the next video.